All right, well, they'll have to dive in if they get the chance here because I don't want to delay too long and run late. So, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Scott Learned. I am the Rotary District 5400 Learning Facilitator, and I'm a member of the Rotary Club of Boise and past president of that club. And I now serve at the district level doing learning opportunities like these. And so I'm really excited to meet some people who are a little bit new to Rotary and talk to you a little bit about what Rotary is and make sure you understand kind of what Rotary looks like beyond maybe just the club experience that you've had some familiarity with. This is meant to be a pretty informal session, so if you have questions, feel free to unmute and let me know what your questions are. But we'll cover some ground and see where we end up, and then I'll allow some time for questions at the end too. So welcome to Rotary. I don't know if anybody's told you, but there are about 1.3 million men and women around the world that are part of Rotary. The map that is on your screen there are countries where there is a Rotary Club. So you'll notice that there's not very many that aren't blue, because we've got Rotary clubs pretty much everywhere, including, I'm told, into Antarctica, there's a Rotary Club. So if you're ever down there, you should probably stop in for a meeting, because one of the benefits of being a Rotarian is you are welcome at any Rotary Club anywhere in the world. You don't have to ask for permission. You can just show up, and there might be a fee to pay, small fee for lunch, but other than that, show up and meet some Rotarians wherever you go in the world. There are more than 46,000 clubs currently worldwide. That includes both clubs for adults and then clubs for younger people. We'll get into that here in a minute. But you're never more than a stone's throw away from a Rotary Club. That's kind of the bottom line. So together, we're accomplishing all kinds of interesting things. We're eradicating polio. We're training peacemakers to go out into the world and actually negotiate peace treaties and things. We're fighting hunger and poverty. We're educating people. We're doing all kinds of things to improve lives worldwide. I always use the stat that Rotary, Starbucks, which of course is known for its global reach, Starbucks is in about 130 countries worldwide. Rotary is in more countries than the United Nations says there are countries. In other words, we're in about 205 countries. So we're really everywhere. So I like to show some famous Rotarians just so you know the illustrious group that you've joined. Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, Winston Churchill, we all remember him, Max Cointreau, the maker of Cointreau liqueur, Marconi invented the wireless, Dr. Mayo of the Mayo Clinic, he was a Rotarian, Pavarotti was a Rotarian, Harlan Sanders, of course, Colonel Sanders. The picture on your screen there of Colonel Sanders, if you could zoom in on it and keep the resolution, you would see that there on his lapel is a Rotary pin. And I was in the Kentucky Fried Chicken up on Federal Way recently, and they have a big blown up picture of Colonel Sanders, and he's got his Rotary pin on his lapel. So that's kind of cool. Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, Orville Wright, and a whole bunch of U.S. presidents are all examples of people who were Rotarians. Now, one of the things you'll notice about this list is it's all men, because, of course, Rotary was started as a men's group, and fortunately, from my perspective, it is no longer. So hopefully 100 years from now, when somebody's putting together a list of famous Rotarians, there will be a lot more balanced representative sample of people on this list. But there you go. I like to share with people kind of when we think about how Rotary is organized and how it's structured, there's really three main parts for you to understand. One is the Rotary Club, and that's, of course, where most people have their first Rotary experiences with a club. For a lot of people, that's where they have all of their Rotary experiences, and they may maybe never venture out beyond their club. And if that's what you want to do, that's perfectly fine. That's great. But there's a lot more to Rotary than just the Rotary Club. So we'll talk too about Rotary International. That's sort of the umbrella organization that governs the Rotary clubs. And then we'll talk about the Rotary Foundation, which is its own separate thing. And it's important for you to understand about that as a Rotarian. So that's kind of what we're going to end up covering today. We'll start with the clubs. There are three major types of Rotary club. What you have experience with, I'm assuming, as a adult Rotarian is a Rotary club. But there's also Rotaract clubs. Those are for university level students and other young adults. So young adults are welcome to join a Rotary club if they want to, but a Rotaract club is going to also be a good opportunity for a younger person to join into Rotary with some people who are more their age group. And then there's Interact clubs. Those are in junior highs and high schools, ages 12 to 18. And we have some of each of these in our district. They're around, and there's always opportunities to form new ones. So if you don't think there's an Interact or Rotaract club in your community, that's an opportunity for a way to serve your community, is to try and form one. So one of the interesting things about the Rotary experience is all Rotary clubs are their own autonomous unit. So there's some general rules and there's some general guidelines around what Rotary clubs are supposed to do. But by and large, Rotary clubs are left to do it their own way. And so you'll see a lot of consistent things that are true at most Rotary clubs, but you'll see a lot of things that are very different in the Rotary experience from one club to the next. So an easy example is meeting times. Rotary used to be a lunch club originally, but over time it's evolved. So there's before work meetings, there's after work meetings, there's maybe meetings on the weekends. And Rotary doesn't care when you want to meet. They don't care if you have a meal or not. They don't care if you want to serve a beverage or not. Any of that is up to the club to decide. My club, the Club of Boise, is a singing club. And so pretty much every week we sing some songs together. We always sing the Idaho State song. We sing My Country 'Tis of Thee. And I've been going, so I'm 48. I've been going to Rotary Club meetings for 48 years because my dad's been a member that whole time. And clear back to my childhood, I remember going to Rotary meetings and singing the Idaho State song and singing My Country 'Tis of Thee, because that's what our club does. And then we usually sing another song at some point during our meeting. There are some clubs that absolutely abhor singing and would never permit that in their club meetings. And so it just highlights that every club's different. One of the fun things about being a Rotarian is going to visit other clubs and seeing how they do things, and perhaps borrowing some of their ideas to bring back to your own club. And, you know, as I said, you're welcome to do that. So I highly encourage it. I got to visit a Rotary club in Mexico one time, and they knew some Americans were coming to visit. And it was a lunch meeting, but there was a bottle of tequila on every table, and the Americans were not allowed to leave the meeting until the tequila was all gone. So that was quite a meeting. So you just have to be prepared, you know, for whatever you encounter. But a lot of clubs love to have visitors, especially visitors from another country. So Rotary clubs vary in size. Some of the smallest clubs just have a handful of members. For a long time, we had a club with only 4 members in our district. But there are a few clubs that run up into the 600 member range. And so you can have some, what I would call a mega club. But most clubs are, you know, in the range of 20 to 40 members, with some clubs smaller and some clubs larger. Pretty much every club has the same basic club officers, which would be the president-elect, who's the person who serves as president the coming Rotary year, the secretary of the club, and the treasurer of the club. But beyond that, most clubs have some sort of committees, but there's not a lot of requirement for that committee structure. So a lot of clubs have a membership committee. A lot of clubs have a program committee that sets the agenda for the programs or gets speakers. Our club has a music committee because we're a singing club. But of course, a lot of clubs would not have a music committee, and that's fine. So again, highlighting that there's some similarities that Rotary International really wants you doing as a club, but by and large, you're free to do things your own way. What's really cool about that is if you and your club members want to change the way you're operating, you're welcome to do that. And so it encourages experimentation. It encourages clubs to try to find different ways to serve their members and to make the experience work for their club members. So I think that's a real strength for Rotary. I would say clubs are the easiest place for a new Rotarian to get involved in Rotary, either in club leadership or stepping up to run a service project or those sorts of things. But it's not the only place to get involved in Rotary. It's just perhaps the easiest first step. Once you move out of the Rotary clubs, each Rotary club is organized into districts, which are organized into zones. And so we're going to talk about that structure now, because I told you at the beginning of this session that I am the district learning facilitator. And if you're a new Rotarian, you may not have any idea what the district is. So I want to explain that. The map I have up on the screen is a map of all of the Rotary districts in the Western United States. And you'll see Southern Idaho is blue, and it's got 5,400 on it because that's the Rotary district in which we all sit, Rotary District 5,400. And our district it covers a little bit of Eastern Oregon, and it runs out to the Idaho-Wyoming border on the east, and it runs about halfway up the state to the north. And there's always that little blip in Nevada that shows up as being part of our district, but there's no Rotary club there. So I don't understand why the map is drawn that way. To me, that ought to be part of 5190, but whatever. It's technically part of 5400. I don't even know that anybody lives in that portion of the world, but there it is. So that is our district, okay? And in that district, we've got each club has their leadership, and then there's an overarching leadership that heads up that district. And the leader of a district is called the district governor. Now, one of the things you're going to learn quickly, if you haven't already as a Rotarian, is there's a whole alphabet soup of acronyms that Rotarians love. And rather than throw all those acronyms at you at once, I'll sort of feed you a few of them. Feel free to ask your club mates if you don't know what acronym somebody's throwing around. Because remember that no one joins Rotary knowing all of the Rotary acronyms. We all had to learn, and so you too will have to learn. Just ask somebody and they'll clue you in. But the DG is the district governor. That's the person who's responsible for our Rotary district. And that person has a budget that they oversee. The clubs pay dues into the district, and then we provide a variety of services to support the clubs, like Rotary101 trainings. But also we provide support with membership development and all kinds of different things throughout the district. So you're in District 5400, Southern Idaho, a little bit of Eastern Oregon. My slide says 41 clubs. I forgot to look. I think we only have 40 clubs at the moment. I don't know if Kathy could nod her head one way or the other if she knows. She's shrugging. 42. John says 42. So right around 40 clubs. The current district governor is a guy named Steve Gage. He's from the Rotary Club of Boise Sunrise. And when his term is over, Kathy Buck will join as the district governor. So right now she is the district governor-elect, and she's on your screen. It says John Buck. That's the crazy guy sitting next to her, but Kathy's actually the district governor-elect, which we call DGE. After Kathy, Mike Markley will serve, and Mike's also on the call. Mike is what's known as the DGN, the district governor nominee. And he's from the Boise Southwest Club. I don't think I said, but Kathy's from the Emmett Club. And then after Mike serves, so we're out 3 years now, the district governor nominee designee is a guy called Carl Clockey, and he's also from Boise Sunrise. one of the things that this illustrates is at the district level, we try to keep the leadership pipeline full. And so we try to make sure that we know who's going to be in charge of the district several years out into the future, because there's training activities that happen all through that period of time for those people who are taking over as district governor. And likewise, Rotary would really like clubs to have that same leadership pipeline, where we know who's going to be your president. We know who is your president. We know who's going to be your president next year. And we even like to know who your president is 2 years out. Most clubs aren't doing that right now. That's something that we'd like to sort of encourage. But that's kind of the idea, is to keep the leadership pipeline rolling. Most jobs in Rotary are a 1-year appointment, and that's true for all the district governors. It's just a 1-year gig. And so it's important that that person has some lead time to make good plans and get their team in place so that they can hit the ground running. One of the things that's a little odd about Rotary is that our year starts on July 1st and ends on June 30th. And so that's when we say they serve for 1 year, that's the term, is from July 1st to June 30th of their year. So Steve will be done at the end of June this year. Kathy will take over on July 1st. She'll run the show for a year, and then Mike will take over, and so on. So that's your district. And then there's a whole series of leaders at that district level. There's people called assistant governors, who are AGs. There's a number of committee leaders. And so that's another avenue to serve Rotary, is to serve at the district level. And then each of those districts gets collected together into what Rotary refers to as a zone. And so on your map, you can see the red dotted line through the center of the map. The districts that are north of that line are in zone 27, which is us. The districts below that line are in zone 26. And so you can see there's around 10 or so districts in a zone. And so if you figure there are between 40 and 60 Rotary clubs in a district, there are roughly 10 districts to a zone. We're talking 500-ish Rotary clubs in a zone. There are 34 zones worldwide, okay? You happen to be sitting in zone 27, which covers northwestern US and a little bit of Canada, leaving out a little bit of Washington. That's part of the zone north of us. And our zone has 12 districts. Each zone has a pairing with another zone. And so our zone pair is zone 26-27, which is why that's what I've got up on the map, which is essentially the Western United States. And all the Rotary clubs in that pair of zones are kind of collected together and headed by what Rotary calls the zone director. And so you've got club leaders, you've got district leaders, and now you've got zone leaders, right? And so you can see that Rotary's really got these tiers of leadership. And one of the main jobs for like the district governor or the zone director is to communicate downward to the clubs what's happening in Rotary worldwide, and to receive communication coming up from the clubs to share with the other zone directors worldwide. And so that's kind of the process. So zone 27 and zone 26 get aggregated together into what we refer to as the Big West zone. And there are 17 of those zone pairs. And so that means there's 17 zone directors worldwide, okay? And that now covers the entire globe. And I should say here, there's one of the things Rotarians love to do is have conventions and conferences, okay? And so at every one of these levels, there's conventions and conferences you can attend. So we have a district conference annually. This year it'll be in Twin Falls. The zones have conferences and conventions. There's Rotary International has an annual convention. And so if you like to travel and you like to get to meet other Rotarians, being involved in leadership at the district level or at the zone level is a way to have an opportunity to do that. You can go to such scenic and exotic locations as Seattle, for example, or Singapore, for example. So that's part of the fun of being in Rotary as well, is those opportunities. Those 17 zone directors form the board for the umbrella organization Rotary International. Okay, and so Rotary International is the organization that sort of sets the basic ground rules for how Rotary clubs operate, and charters new Rotary clubs. So it's governed by a board of directors. The 17 zone directors I mentioned. Our zone director right now is a guy named Dan Himmelsbach. He's down in Denver. Let's see, is Windspiller gonna take over after him? I think so. Yeah. So those folks will be our zone directors. And then there's the president-elect of Rotary, and a guy named the general secretary of Rotary. Of all the jobs that I've talked about so far, club leadership, district leadership, zone leadership, the president of Rotary International, one of the hallmarks of all of those jobs is they are volunteers. And so everybody up and down the line of the organization are serving on a volunteer basis. If you're the president of Rotary International, you're going to travel a whole heck of a lot. And so Rotary is going to foot the bill for that travel for you, but they're not paying you a salary. You're doing that on your own. And so that's a big deal. There's one person that I've talked about so far that actually draws a salary, and that's the gentleman in the upper left corner of this slide. His name's John Huco, and he is the general secretary of Rotary International. So he's sort of the manager of the organization. And then you've got a bunch of volunteers that are his bosses that set the policy directions for the organization. John oversees a whole crew of paid employees, most of whom are located in Illinois, at the Rotary International headquarters. But he's the guy that kind of is the operations man for the group, okay? The woman in the bottom there, her name is Stephanie Urchik. She's our current Rotary International president. She comes from the Rotary Club of McMurray, which is in Pittsburgh. And the guy in the upper right corner is a guy named Mario Di Camargo. He is from the Rotary Club of Santo Andre, which is in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And so he'll be our president starting in July. Kathy and I and a couple other folks have had an opportunity to meet Mario. He seems like a very cool guy. And there were lots of Mario from the Mario Brothers jokes. So be prepared that when he's president, you're going to see a lot of like Mario Brothers hats and stuff, because he seems to find that funny. So it tells you a little bit about the guy. General Secretary and CEO is John Huco. I mentioned that. And this group gets together on a quarterly basis. They set policies for the organization, and sort of tell Rotary clubs what they should and shouldn't be doing in broad strokes. Good. One of the things that they do is they set a whole bunch of values and objectives and things like that. And I think that's a good way to figure out what a group is really all about. Most Rotarians have heard that the Rotary motto is service above self. But that may be about all you know about what our values and objectives are. So I'd like to share that as part of this program. And the Rotary sort of talks about there being 5 basic ways for you to serve. And you might choose to serve in only one of these ways or more than one of these ways. But this is how Rotary views it. You can serve your club through being a club officer, serving on the board, participating in service projects, that kind of thing. Through your vocation, you can serve. So whatever it is you do for work, that is an opportunity to serve your community. And that's something that Rotary really believes in, that your Rotary service is not limited to your involvement in your club. Serving your community through service projects and being involved in other community organizations. Rotary believes in serving internationally, so it's pretty common that people in Boise are helping people in Ecuador, for example, or people in Pocatello are helping some people in Africa with some entrepreneurship projects over there. And that's a big part of Rotary that sets Rotary apart from a lot of other service organizations. And then lastly, service to youth. Rotary has a lot of robust youth-oriented programs. We're very well known for our Rotary Youth Exchange program, where kids travel all over the globe to do exchanges in foreign countries. And if you haven't had any contact with any of the exchange students, you should. It's very cool. We got to host an exchange student last year, and it was really fun. We hosted her right around this time of year, and we keep coming up with memories of last year when Fiona was here with us, and the traditions that she brought to us from Denmark, where she was from, and that was really enriching for me and my family. Good. And then Rotary has 7 areas of focus that we target. I'm going to show you those in a minute, so hold that thought. And we have what most people have encountered at some point is our 4-way test, which is an ethical guide for our members. And the point of all of this is to follow the object of Rotary. And a lot of people don't know about the object of Rotary. The object of Rotary has kind of 4 main components to it. One is to develop acquaintance as an opportunity for service. So what most clubs talk about is fellowship, and that by becoming friends with our fellow club members, that gives us an opportunity to serve them, to serve each other, to serve our communities. So that's one. The second is maintaining high ethical standards in business and professions, to recognize that all occupations are worthy occupations, and that each Rotarian's occupation is an opportunity to serve society. And so Rotary is a big believer in whatever your occupation is, that is an opportunity to serve your community and make the world a better place. That's 2. 3 is the application of the ideal of service in every Rotarian's personal, business, and community life. In other words, we want service to be a mindset for you, not something that you do for an hour a week when you go to your Rotary Club meeting, but something that really becomes pervasive in your life. And then the 4th thing is the advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace through a world fellowship of business and professional people who are united in this idea of service. And, you know, we'll talk a little bit about what Rotary is actually doing to try to foster peace in the world. You are a member of a district that is either has now become or is just about to become recognized as a peace district by Rotary International. And so that's pretty exciting. So the 7 areas of focus are on your screen here. We've got peace building and conflict prevention, disease prevention and treatment. So examples there are malaria prevention, of course, polio prevention that most Rotarians are familiar with. Water sanitation and hygiene. Our club has been involved in helping install potable water systems in the mountains of Ecuador, where they have plenty of rainfall, but a lot of communities don't have a way to capture and clean that water and then have it delivered to their homes. And for most of those families, it would be cost prohibitive to install that equipment. So it's a great opportunity for a Rotary Club to come in and do the installation, and then the local community will do the upkeep. Maternal and child health, so things like prenatal screenings and maternal care, screening children for common childhood diseases, vaccination programs, basic education and literacy. So that encompasses, of course, direct education and literacy programs, but it also encompasses programs. One of the problems clubs have identified is that girls in a lot of developing nations have to drop out of school when they reach puberty because they don't have adequate supply of period products, and so they have to stay home from school when they're having their period, and that results in them missing too much education. They eventually drop out. And so if you can provide period products to girls, they will stay in school. And so that's a sort of project that you could fit under a number of these Rotary areas of focus, right? That could be a water sanitation and hygiene program, but it also could be a basic education literacy program. Community economic development, I talked about the program, the entrepreneur program that's happening in Africa. There's lots of micro lending projects and things of that nature. And then our newest area of focus is the environment. So that would, of course, encompass things like, collecting trash along the roadsides and planting trees and all those sorts of projects. That's it. Now, one of the things I've kind of decided over the years is I challenge you to think up a worthy project that doesn't fit at least one of these 7 umbrellas, one of these 7 areas of focus, because I feel like you can pretty much fit anything into at least one of them if you're a little creative about how you phrase it. So that's something for, a little homework for you to brainstorm. So that is all Rotary International, okay? The clubs, the district, the zone, the board of directors, all of these sort of vision statements and all that kind of stuff, that's RI. RI, another acronym, Rotary International. Rotary has another very important component that's a separate independent organization, which is called the Rotary Foundation, or TRF. You'll hear TRF a lot. And that is the sort of money wing of the outfit, if you will. So TRF is a separate organization. Their mission is to support the work being done by Rotary International. And they describe it as a fund dedicated to doing good in the world. Okay. Right now, that fund has a little bit over $1 billion in assets ready to deploy into the world. They have distributed in excess of $4 billion in service projects over the history of the foundation. And pretty much all of that comes out of the pockets of Rotarians. It was started famously by a contribution of $26.50, because that's what was on hand when they decided to start the foundation. And since then, it's mostly contributions of Rotary Club members. A lot of Rotary members just have some kind of systemized way to make contributions to the Rotary Foundation. You don't have to do that by any means. But a lot of folks do. We view it as part of being a Rotarian as contributing to the foundation. And so a lot of folks will do that sort of thing, put something on auto pay or whatever you like to do. And it turns out that if you contribute $10 a month for 40 years, as some of our Rotarians have been doing, you end up contributing a heck of a lot of money over that period of time. The TRF has all kinds of different programs. You can imagine if you're managing $1 billion and you're trying to distribute that money into the communities in sensible ways, that there's a lot of opportunities to do so. So I'm going to touch on a few of them today. But there is a board of trustees that is responsible for managing that money, investing it, setting rules about how they're going to spend it, setting all the policies about grant making and all that sort of thing. There's often a lot of intertwining between RI directors and TRF trustees. They work very closely together. Greg Pod is currently the trustee out of our zone, and I believe Greg was a zone director for our zone some years ago. So there's a lot of consistency where you see some of the same people filling some of these jobs at different times. But it's important to know that RI has its board that is responsible for managing RI, and the Rotary Foundation has its own board that's responsible for managing the money in that foundation. Okay, and that helps with things like transparency and making sure that no one person has too much control over any particular aspect of the organization. That becomes pretty important when you're starting to talk about billions of dollars. Famous TRF programs, probably the most famous Rotary Foundation program is the Polio Plus program to eradicate polio. And one of the neat things to know about Polio Plus was it was started by a Rotary club in the Philippines. As I understand it, it was an all-female Rotary club in 1979 that decided that they were on a little island in the Philippines, and they decided they wanted to try and eradicate polio on their little corner of the world. And so they did. And the Rotary Foundation took note of what they had done and took note of the polio epidemic that was currently affecting the entire world at that time. And they said, we think we could potentially have a pretty big impact on this and potentially even eradicate it from the face of the earth altogether. Since then, Polio Plus has immunized more than 3 billion people against polio. It turns out you don't have to immunize everybody. You just have to immunize enough people consistently in a region that the disease quits living in the environment in that region, and then pretty soon nobody gets polio anymore. So I've never been vaccinated against polio because it doesn't exist in Idaho at the moment. But that's really the approach. As a result, in 1980, there were something like 300,000 new polio cases a year. And many of those people were either fatal or was a lifetime of paralysis. And we've reduced that now into the dozens of cases, and in some years, single-digit numbers of polio cases. So that's pretty remarkable. Right now, there are only 2 countries in the world where polio is endemic, and that's Pakistan and Afghanistan. The challenge that Polio Plus is really facing is the Taliban wants nothing to do with polio vaccinations in Afghanistan. And so that's going to be the last hurdle for us to solve, us as Rotarians to solve, is figuring out how to get those people vaccinated to finish this off. But that's one of them. And one of the beauties of the way the Rotary Foundation works is they really leverage partnerships and matching contributions and things of that nature to where we've got partnerships with the World Health Organization, the UN, the CDC. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has contributed hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars toward this effort, and has a formal matching program with Rotary so that contributions of Rotarians to Polio Plus get matched by contributions by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So it's all pretty neat and pretty successful. Some of the less known programs, the Rotary Foundation runs a series of peace centers at universities around the world where folks can go and they go on a Rotary Peace Fellow scholarship. There's about 130 of them a year, and people go to these peace institutes and they study various related skills. So they study how to negotiate peace agreements and things like that. And when you start reading about people who have graduated from this program, it's often not people that are household names. It's not world leaders that go to this thing, but it's the people that the world leaders tap to actually go have the conversations with each other to try to figure out how to stop shooting each other and start having more productive conversations about things. And so when you look at, for example, the treaty that was formed between the Colombian government and the drug traffickers in Colombia to quit shooting each other, and a lot of the rebel groups in Colombia, those were all negotiated by graduates of Rotary Foundation Peace Centers. And so it's really a much more than a sort of rah-rah world peace. Rotary is really trying to find productive ways to help people get the skill set they need and get out into the world and actually have these hard conversations and figure out how to move the needle on peacemaking. So yeah, that's what I told you. Okay, Rotary Foundation, probably their biggest, widest reaching kind of umbrella is grant making. They do a lot of grants. Grants are available for a lot of different things. One of them is what's called a global grant. Global grants are kind of big projects that are international in nature. They have to fit one of the 7 areas of focus. And the hallmark of a global grant is you have a club that's local to where the project is going to be carried out. And then you have a club in some other country that's sort of sponsoring that project. So for clubs in Idaho, we would typically be that sponsor club where we would be sort of raising the money and helping to carry out the project, but the project's usually happening in a developing country. So there's global grants happening all the time. Our club has just completed 2 of them, one in Ecuador and one in Colombia, and they're really fun. They're complicated. They can be a little bit of a heavy lift for folks, but it's one way that you can get the Rotary Foundation to send money to do something cool that you want to try and do somewhere in the world. So part of being a Rotarian is access to lots of free money, and a lot of that comes through grants from the Rotary Foundation. You just have to ask for it and meet their criteria, and they'll give it to you. Our district also has a grant making program. These are smaller scale grants. They usually fund a local program of some kind, but you could use it to fund really anything that your club's interested in doing. That money that funds those district grants actually comes from the Rotary Foundation. And one of the ways that the Rotary Foundation works is as we contribute money to the foundation hangs on to it for a 3-year window of time. They invest it and they make a bunch more money off of our money. And then they basically give the district our money back, or a portion of it, to let us go spend it in our community. And so one way to think about a gift to the foundation is actually a loan to do service in our community a few years from now. But because you're doing that, you're creating the ability to do all these projects all over the world. So pretty neat feature of the Rotary Foundation. One of the things that I've seen happen several times as I've been a Rotarian over many years is when there's a disaster somewhere in the world, Rotary is often one of the first aid organizations to show up. And that's because the Rotary Foundation has these disaster response grants, and they have all these disaster response funds where if there's been a natural disaster, or when Russia invaded Ukraine, for example, the Rotary Foundation pumps money into those regions, into the Rotary clubs in those regions, to provide services and meet the needs of the local population. So with the Ukraine conflict, when that first started, the Rotary Foundation was issuing $50,000 grants to pretty much any club neighboring the Ukraine that was being inundated with refugees coming out of the Ukraine. And pretty much if a club asked for it, my understanding is they got that grant. And grants were being written within days of that conflict starting to make sure that the humanitarian crisis was being dealt with. They do it with earthquakes and floods and fires and all that sort of thing. So that could be a really impactful thing that Rotary does. There's a thing you're going to hear about as a Rotarian, which is called DDF, which is District Designated Funds. And that's where the Rotary Foundation has said to our district, you get this amount of money to designate what you want to have done with it. And so there's certain things that our district can and can't do with that money. But primarily what we're trying to do is give it away to projects. And so what we need from Rotarians is projects, because there's plenty of money to give to those projects. We just need the projects to support. But you get the sense there's a lot of availability of resources out there to continue to contribute to your community and to help you with projects and things as life goes on. Now, there's a whole bunch of other foundations and groups and things that are related to Rotary, and I'll touch on those for a moment. So there are a lot of other Rotary foundations out there. There is the Rotary Foundation, which is the big one that services the entire planet. But then there's a lot of regional Rotary foundations. So the Boise area has what we call GBRF, which is the Greater Boise Rotary Foundation. And so if you're a Rotarian in the Boise area, you might contribute to your club, you might contribute to GBRF, you might contribute to the Rotary Foundation, right? All of those things are avenues for contributing your resources. And then a lot of clubs have their own foundation. You don't have to. Your club does not have to have a foundation, but it can. One I happen to know is the Rotary Club of McCall Foundation. Our club does not have a separate foundation. We used to. We eventually decided it wasn't worth the record keeping and things to keep it up. The district has a way to help with receiving money if somebody really needs tax deduction on their gift. The district can help with that process. So just know that that's true. But if you hear about the foundation, that could reference any of these organizations. So you have to sometimes dial into what the person's actually talking about. Rotary also has a bunch of working groups that are organized around specific work areas. And I call these the serious Rotary groups because there's going to be some not very serious ones coming here in a minute. But these are action groups are, people from all over the planet who want to get together to talk about particular issues of interest to them. So one example that is pretty active is called SRAG. SRAG is the Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group. And one of the things about these action groups is they've got their own leadership involvement. One of our Rotarians in our club, Lori Zuckerman, was the director, one of the directors of SRAG worldwide for a few years. So she would meet with other directors from all over the world to talk about SRAG and how to promote environmental sustainability in Rotary. So that's another opportunity to serve in the Rotary world. WASH is the Water, Sanitation and Hygiene Rotary Action Group. There's one about malaria. There's one to end slavery. That particular Rotary Action Group is quite active in North America because they're focused on human trafficking issues. And so there's some guys out of the California area that are Rotarians that are involved in the slavery Rotary Action Group. And I've heard them speak a number of times about human trafficking and what they're trying to do to stop that. It's eye-opening. So those are the serious groups that you could join as part of being a Rotarian. There are also a bunch of fun ones. These are called Rotary Fellowships, and they're organized around hobbies and special interests and things. So there's a Rotary Fellowship for badminton players. There's a Rotary Fellowship for flying. Startup investors. I'm a lawyer, so the Rotary Action Group of Lawyers, the Rotary Fellowship of Lawyers. And then, of course, the very famous Rotary Fellowship of Metalheads. It's a real thing. They show up at the international conference and they blare metal music and they dress up, and it's pretty funny and fun. So if you're into metal, you might look into joining the Rotary Metalheads Fellowship. But there's dozens and dozens of these, and so probably there's one that would appeal to you. There's one for Scotch drinkers. There's one for beer drinkers. There's one for marathon runners. You name it. There's probably a Rotary Fellowship out there for you. I think that's it. Oh, let's talk about getting involved. Rotary is not a spectator sport. Okay. So if all you do is show up to your club meeting and have lunch or have breakfast or whatever and go away, you really won't get much. I think you really won't get a ton out of your Rotary membership. What you really need to do is talk to folks about how you can get involved. And what I find about Rotarians is a lot of times club leaders look around and say, we really need somebody to do X. And they look at each other and one of them does it. And then we need somebody to do Y. And the Rotary club leaders look at each other and pick somebody to do that. And what that means is that new members often are left sort of on the sidelines, not sure how they fit in. And so one of the things I really encourage you to do, if you don't have a place to fit in your club, is talk to the club leaders about what interests you and what opportunities there might be for you to serve your club or to lead up a committee of some kind or to head up a service project that's interesting to you. And one of the neat things about Rotary is if you have a good idea of a way to serve in your community, you can probably find a few Rotarians and you can probably find some money and you can probably go out and do that service project. And most clubs will at least try it once and see how it goes. And a lot of great service projects have been born out of that mentality, and it's just up to you to kind of say, here's a thing that I think we could do, and present it to your club leaders. Another thing for you all to know about is Rotary has a very robust website. It's at my.rotary.org. I encourage you to go there, create yourself an account if you don't have one, and then explore. There's lots of resources available. There's a thing called the Learning Center where you can get a lot more content, probably much more than you could ever absorb, and learn a lot more about Rotary and what it does and kind of what the roles are and how you can be a part of it. So I really encourage you to do that. Sign up, show up, raise your hand when people say they need help. Remember that meetings are all open, so if you want to come visit our club sometime, please do. We meet at noon on Thursdays downtown. You want to go out to Emmett and visit Kathy's club, you're welcome to do that. So thanks, Todd. I noticed Todd did not dress up for us. That's typical. So the biggest thing is figure out something your club could do to help your community. Talk to your club leaders about doing that. And don't be surprised when 6 months down the road, you're doing it. Because that's kind of how Rotary works. It's sort of the magic of it, the whole thing. And I encourage you to put me to the test. And then, of course, remember, we all have the 3 T's: time, talent, and treasure. Everybody has those in varying proportions, and that's fine. If what you have to donate is time, please do. If what you have to donate is talent, please do. If what you have to contribute is treasure, please do. The point is, you have a contribution you can make in your club and in your community, and Rotary's here to kind of help you figure out how to leverage that to do great things. That's the end of my blabbing at you. I'm happy to hang out for a few minutes and answer any questions that come up. And I know Kathy's still on, and I assume Mike's still listening. So if you've got questions for those folks, they're here as well, and I'm sure they'd be happy to stand for questions if needed. I just put them on the spot, but they're up for it. Otherwise, thank you for coming, and I'll look forward to meeting you in person at some point, those of you that I haven't yet. So thanks.